Reborn on the betrothal day. I avoided the prince's token and smiled, wishing him and his lover eternal union. Play the full story in one go. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. The exciting story begins right now. Mingshu. This jade pendant in the shape of twin fish, made of mutton fat jade, was a relic left to me by my mother. Today, in front of the emperor and all the officials, I give it to you as a symbol of my sincere intentions to marry the legitimate daughter of the Yan family. A gentle and pleasant male voice echoed throughout the hall of supreme harmony. Chu Qian'an wore a crimson-purple robe befitting a prince. His eyes were full of affection as he held up the exquisitely crafted jade pendant in his hands and presented it to me. The hall was utterly silent, with everyone's gaze fixed on me, filled with envy and admiration. The emperor on the dragon throne smiled, stroking his beard, while my father, Grand Tutor Yan, also wore a pleased expression. Just a moment ago, I was swallowing the last gulp of poisonous wine in that cold, imprisoned palace. Now, the blindingly bright yellow glazed tiles and Chu Qian's hypocritical smile suddenly rushed into my sight. My fingernails dug deep into my palms. The sharp pain reminded me that I had truly returned to the autumn of the 15th year of the Jianda era, the day when the emperor publicly arranged my marriage to Prince Qi. I lowered my eyelids and stared at the jade pendant hanging in midair. Seeing that I didn't answer right away, Chu Qian's eyes flickered with a barely noticeable hint of impatience. He took half a step forward, lowered his voice, and spoke in a gentle tone that only the two of us could hear. Mingshu, why are you so distracted? Please answer. Your Majesty is watching. Behind him stood a delicate figure. It was his cousin, Lu Qingwan. At that moment, she stared intently at the jade pendant with tearful eyes full of unspoken emotions. The silk handkerchief in her hands was almost torn to shreds. I suddenly let out a soft laugh. Under Chu Qian's astonished gaze, instead of reaching out, I simply stepped back half a step. Turning around directly, he faced the supreme ruler on the high platform, clasped his hands together, and bowed deeply. Your Majesty, I am but a humble and insignificant person. I truly cannot accept such deep affection from your Highness the Prince. My voice was clear and resonant, echoing throughout the empty hall. Upon hearing this, the entire hall was in an uproar. Everyone knew that the crown prince's beloved was close to Prince Qi. It was thought that the marriage arrangement would be finalized today as expected. But who would have imagined such a turn of events? The emperor on the dragon throne suppressed his smile and spoke with authoritative tone. Yan Mingshu, do you even realize what you're saying? Prince Qi is my beloved son. Your Yan family has a long tradition of scholarship. What's wrong with this marriage? I stood up straight, with a calm expression on my face. My gaze swept over Chu Qian'an and Lu Qingwan beside me. To reply to His Majesty, Prince Qi is truly magnificent in appearance. Of course, I hold him in high regard. However, I believe that each person is meant to have only one true love in their life. Prince Qi and Miss Lu have known each other since childhood, and their relationship is special. Just now, when I saw Miss Lu look at that jade pendant, her eyes were filled with reluctance and sorrow. As the saying goes, a gentleman helps others achieve their desires. Although I'm a woman, I certainly don't want to be the one who destroys such a beautiful relationship. As soon as I finished speaking, a chorus of suppressed gasps filled the hall. Countless pairs of eyes shot like knives toward Lu Qingwan, who was standing in the corner. Chu Qian's face turned deathly pale in an instant. He never could have imagined that Yan Mingshu, who had always obeyed him and taken care of everything for him, would expose his private affairs in front of the emperor. Yan Mingshu, what nonsense are you talking about? Chu Qian'an lost his composure and urgently interrupted me. Then he turned to kneel before the emperor. Your Majesty, your son and his cousin Qingwan have a pure relationship between brother and sister. There's nothing improper between them at all. Mingshu must have believed the slanderous rumors and misunderstood your son. After saying that, he turned to look at me with a heartbroken expression, as if I were some unreasonable, jealous woman. Mingshu, it's one thing to act capriciously on ordinary days, but to behave in such an improper manner in front of the emperor today, how does that befit a lady of noble birth? Qingwan has a tragic background and relies on others for support. Why do you still go out of your way to slander her? Seeing this, Lu Qingwan also immediately knelt to the ground with a thud. Her delicate shoulders trembled violently, and tears the size of beans rolled down her face. She looked truly pitiable. Your Majesty, please calm down. Miss Yan, please also calm down. It's all Qingwan's fault. Lu Qingwan sobbed, hitting her forehead against the golden brick. Qingwan is fully aware of her humble status. She never dared to dream of becoming the Princess Qi, as long as she can stay by her cousin's side. Even if it means merely serving tea or being a concubine, Qingwan would be willing to do so. Please, Miss Yan, don't let Qingwan's actions upset your cousin and ruin your relationship. What a clever way of using retreat as a strategy to advance. Typical of those who play the green tea game. Her words seemingly serve to save Chu Qian'an from embarrassment, but in reality, every word confirms the ambiguous relationship between them. What brother-sister relationship is this? Which proper-minded cousin would publicly beg to become her cousin's concubine? As expected, the emperor's expression turned completely grim. The royal family valued dignity above all else. If Prince Qi hadn't yet married a legitimate wife and was involved in a scandalous affair with his cousin, it would be a disgrace to the royal household. Enough. The emperor snapped coldly, slapping the armrest of his dragon throne hard. The great hall fell dead silent instantly, with everyone holding their breath. Chu Qian'an and Lu Qingwan were so terrified that they lay on the ground, trembling violently. I stood still, my back straight, with a polite yet detached smile on my lips. Out of the corner of my eye, I glanced at the ranks of military officers. There, a tall and imposing figure stood silently, staring in my direction. It was General Huo Mingche, dressed in the dark-colored military uniform. His face was stern, and his deep, unfathomable eyes held a mysterious glint that I couldn't understand. When I glanced at him, he nodded slightly. I turned my gaze away and looked back at the platform. Today, I must break this hopeless situation of being forced into marriage. The dead silence in the grand hall was suddenly broken by the emperor's furious outburst. The emperor's authority weighed like an invisible boulder, pressing heavily on everyone's heart. Prince Qi, is this what you call pure brotherly and sisterly affection? The emperor's gaze was like a drawn sword, fixed on Chu Qian'an, who was kneeling on the ground. Chu Qian's forehead immediately broke out in fine beads of cold sweat. He turned his head sharply and glared at Lu Qingwan fiercely. There was no trace of past tenderness in his gaze now, only a furious warning. Lu Qingwan was so frightened by his gaze that she immediately fell silent, forgetting even to cry. She could only bite her lower lip tightly, shrinking back in place like a frightened quail. Your Majesty, please calm your anger. Chu Qian'an kowtowed deeply, his voice urgent yet trying to remain calm. Your servant truly regards Qingwan merely as a sister. It was she who behaved improperly in the palace today. Speaking without thinking, your servant's heart has always belonged to Mingshu. This doublefish jade pendant is proof of that. After saying that, he tried to hand me the jade pendant again. His eyes held a hint of pleading and urgency, as if he were saying, Yan Mingshu, stop making a fuss. Please lay out these steps for me. I didn't go to look at that jade pendant. Instead, I turned my gaze toward my father, Yan Xiu, the Grand Tutor of the realm. At that moment, my father stepped forward from his position as the highest-ranking civil official. He lifted the hem of his official robe and knelt down in the hall with a solemn expression on his face. Your Majesty. My father's voice was steady and firm, carrying the unyielding integrity characteristic of a scholar. This old minister has failed to raise my daughter properly, thereby disturbing your Majesty. However, our Yan family has always been known for its integrity and strict family traditions. Though my daughter lacks talent, she is still my legitimate daughter, whom I've raised with great care. Your Highness, you hold a noble status. This old minister dares not aspire to be on equal terms with you, but seeing the deep affection between you and Miss Lu, I believe that forced marriages bring no happiness. Marriage should be a union between two families. If resentment arises as a result, It would be contrary to my wishes and certainly not beneficial to the royal family. My father's words carried weight. Every word he said served to protect me, while also dealing a blow to Chu Qian'an. The emperor's expression was unreadable. His gaze shifted back and forth between his father and Chu Qian'an, with his brows tightly furrowed. Chu Qian'an was completely panicked. He knew full well the consequences of losing the Yan family's support. Ignoring all notions of princely dignity, he hurriedly knelt down and tried to grab the hem of my dress. Mingshu, please explain things to the Grand Tutor for me. There's affection between us. How can you reject all our past relationship just because of a momentary outburst? If you mind Qingwan, I'll send her back to her hometown right away. We won't see each other anymore. Is that acceptable? Upon hearing this, Lu Qingwan suddenly raised her head, staring at Chu Qian'an in disbelief. The color drained completely from her face, leaving her looking weak and unsteady. I shifted to the side, avoiding Chu Qian'an's hand. My gaze remained calm, without a trace of disturbance. Your Highness, that is not correct. I bowed slightly, my voice gentle yet firm and resolute. If your Highness abandons your poor, helpless cousin for my sake, it would mean condemning yourself to injustice. I cannot bear such a blame. Miss Lu spoke with heartfelt sorrow. Just now she would rather humble herself and become a concubine than be separated from your Highness. Such devotion should be witnessed by heaven itself. I paused for a moment, then looked directly at the emperor on the high platform. I bowed deeply once again, speaking earnestly. Your Majesty, since childhood, I have studied the teachings of the sages. I deeply understand that a gentleman should promote what is right and prevent what is wrong. I implore your Highness to show kindness and loyalty. Miss Lu has true feelings for your Highness. If I intervene forcefully, it will only cause discord in the royal household and bring shame to the royal family. I dare to ask your Majesty to reconsider your decision and allow your Highness and Miss Lu to be together. I am willing to step aside and pray that you two may be united for life. The grand hall was completely silent. The officials, both civil and military, looked at me with a hint of respect in their eyes. In such a difficult situation, the young lady of the Yan family not only didn't lose her composure and cry, but also acted with grace and wisdom. Considering the overall situation at all times, her demeanor was far beyond that of Lu Qingwan, who could only cry while kneeling on the ground. The emperor pondered for a long time, his sharp gaze scanning Chu Qian's pale and panicked face. A trace of undisguised disappointment flashed in his eyes. He sighed and waved his hand. Yan Taifu knows how to raise daughters well. Mingshu is truly understanding and virtuous. I am greatly relieved. The emperor's voice aimed its dignity and coldness. As for Prince Qi, his behavior was improper and he lost his composure in the palace. The matter of arranging a marriage for him is hereby cancelled. Chu Qian'an, you shall return to the Prince Qi's mansion and reflect on your actions. Without my orders, you are not allowed to leave the mansion. As for that Lady Lu, since she prefers to become a concubine rather than not enter the mansion at all, then let her be. She may serve as a concubine in the mansion. Your Majesty. Chu Qian'an was stunned as if struck by lightning. Collapsing to the ground, not only had he lost the support of the Yan family, which he had longed for, but he was also effectively confined to his quarters. As for Lu Qingwan, she was reduced to the status of a lowest-ranking concubine, not even earning the title of secondary consort. Lu Qingwan rolled her eyes and passed out on the spot. Your servant, your humble subject, thanks you for your great kindness. My father and I bowed in gratitude together. The crisis was over. I stood up, holding my father's hand, then turned to leave. In that moment of turning, my gaze met Huo Mingche's again among the military officers. He stood as upright as a pine tree, but in his usually cold and stern eyes, there was now a faint hint of appreciation and a smile. I nodded slightly in response, then gathered my thoughts, helped my father up, and walked out of the Hall of Supreme Harmony with steady steps. The wheels rolled over the bluestone pavement, producing a steady and rhythmic clattering sound. The imposing atmosphere of the Hall of Supreme Harmony was kept at bay by the thick curtains of the carriage. Inside, a faint scent of orchids filled the air. My father sat across from me, His usually stern gaze now examined me with a hint of curiosity. After a long while, he stroked his beard and let out a long sigh. Sure. Today in the palace. You acted with determination and restraint. Your father is very pleased. But you've always admired Prince Qi. Was today's actions the result of careful consideration? Or was it an impulsive decision born out of anger? I met my father's sharp yet understanding gaze. A faint smile appeared on my lips as I spoke in a calm yet firm voice. Father, what your daughter desires is a life filled with mutual support and peace within the household. Today, he handed over that jade pendant hesitantly, while Lady Lu cried bitterly beside him. From this small incident, we can see the whole picture. A prince who can't even control the behavior of women in his own household, let alone prevent them from behaving improperly in front of the emperor, is certainly not a suitable match. In the past, I was blinded by his gentle and respectable appearance, but today's experience has been like a wake-up call. I must make a clear decision now, without any hesitation. Hearing these words, the worry in his father's eyes completely vanished, replaced by undisguised admiration. He nodded firmly. Good. Truly worthy of being my daughter. Yan Xiu, you know how to take action when necessary and know when to back down. Prince Qi has ulterior motives. She wants to use the reputation of our Yan family as a stepping stone for his own goals. Yet he can't give up his lustful desires. Today, although the emperor seems to be punishing him, he's actually sending a message to our Yan family. By stepping back today, you've preserved both our family's reputation and the emperor's favor. You've handled this excellently. Not only that. Father, I leaned forward slightly and lowered my voice. Since the emperor has ordered Prince Qi to reflect on his actions in seclusion, our Yan family should also withdraw all the favors and gifts we've given in the past, as a way to avoid suspicion. Firstly, this shows compliance with the emperor's wishes. Secondly, it demonstrates our Yan family's resolve not to get involved in political struggles. My father gave me a deep look, a glint in his eyes. Then he smiled cheerfully and said, Good. It's always been your mother and you who've taken care of household affairs. Now that we've decided to part ways, you go ahead and handle everything. If the sky falls, I'll hold it up for you. With my father's words, I feel completely at ease. Back at the Grand Tutor's residence, my mother was already pacing anxiously in the main hall. Upon hearing that the arranged marriage had been cancelled and Prince Qi had been confined to his quarters, she was first shocked. Then, taking my hand, her eyes filled with tears as she repeated several times, May the Buddha bless us. She had always disapproved of Lu Qingwan's delicate and artificial mannerisms. Now that I had completely withdrawn from the arrangement, she was overjoyed. After calming my parents down, I didn't go back to my own room. Instead, I headed straight for the accounting office and the waterside pavilion in the mansion. Someone, go invite Uncle Zhong over. Sitting upright in my armchair, I took the freshly brewed tea from the maid. I glanced at the foam on top of the tea, my expression growing colder by the moment. Before long, Master Zhong, the chief steward of the Yan family, arrived in a hurry. He was in charge of the Yan family's outer compounds and various properties. He was a highly intelligent and capable man. Miss, are you looking for this old servant? Uncle Zhong bowed respectfully. I put down the teacup. The clinking of the porcelain produced a clear, crisp sound. Uncle Zhong, pass my orders on. First, immediately freeze the 3 secret bank accounts at Huitong Bank that are in the name of the Yan family, but actually used by the staff of the Prince Qi's mansion. Replace all the shopkeepers at those 2 silk shops on Zhuke Street and Zhuhilu with our own people. Starting today, not a single penny of profits is to be sent to the Prince Qi's mansion anymore. I understand. I'll send someone to close the accounts right away. Uncle Zhong didn't waste any words and agreed immediately. Secondly, my long-fingered hands tapped gently on the rosewood table, producing a light tapping sound. Tell the people at Nanshan Academy that, in my father's name, the Yan family will no longer fund the Yanshi Pavilion established by Prince Qi. Inform those scholars that Prince Qi has been ordered to seclude himself for reflection and self-examination, and thus has no time to focus on poetry and learning. The Yan family has withdrawn its financial support for this project. If they want to make a living in the future, they must earn their own titles through examinations. They should stop relying on Prince Qi's name to live off others' expense. A look of satisfaction flashed in Uncle Zhong's eyes as he nodded repeatedly. The young lady is truly wise. This old servant has always disliked those sycophantic scholars. I stood up, walked over to the desk, took out a pair of chess pieces with intricate carvings from the drawer, and handed them to Uncle Zhong. My gaze carried an undeniable authority. The last item, and also the most important one. I stared into Uncle Zhong's eyes and said slowly, "Take my private treasury with you. Along with a few articulate maids and strong-bodied servants, use the largest carriage in the mansion to go to Prince Qi's palace. Tell them that all the favors bestowed by the emperor are meaningless now. The Yan family dares not aspire to such heights, since there's no longer any connecting on between our two families. Demand back all the rare paintings from past dynasties that were lent to Prince Qi for his enjoyment, the imperial endowed Duanxi inkstones, as well as the fine incense I gave and the jade carvings." Uncle Zhong took the cards with both hands, looking somewhat hesitant. "Miss, isn't it too obvious to demand things in such a public manner? Won't people think the Yan family is petty, petty-minded?" I sneered, though the smile didn't reach my eyes. "Uncle Zhong, remember this. The display must be grand, and the manner must be respectful. If anyone asks, tell them that the emperor wishes Prince Chu Qian'an to meditate and reflect on his mistakes. Keeping these trivial, vanity-inducing items in the prince's residence goes against the emperor's wishes. We must ensure that everyone along the street and all the spies in the various mansions see clearly that it isn't our Yan family being petty, but rather that we're acting in accordance with the emperor's orders to avoid suspicion. I'd like to see if Chu Qian'an still has the nerve to demand that we give up our belongings. I shall obey the order. I will never let the young lady down." Uncle Zhong was filled with energy as he turned and strode out of the waterside pavilion. Watching Uncle Zhong's retreating figure, I walked over to the window and pushed open the carved wooden pane. The autumn sun streamed into the pavilion. The osmanthus flowers in the courtyard were in full bloom, golden and exuding a sweet, faint fragrance. In front of the vermilion-painted gates of the Prince Qi's mansion, the area was now bustling with people. Master Zhong, the chief steward of the Yan mansion, brought 5 or 6 large carriages, completely blocking the wide street in front of the mansion's entrance. The maids and servants accompanying him were all energetic and neatly dressed in the blue silk uniforms of the Yan mansion. They stood in 2 orderly rows. "Where is the steward of the royal mansion?" Uncle Zhong stood beside the stone lion, speaking in a firm and clear voice. Neither overbearing nor humble, his voice was powerful and carried far. "I've been sent here by the Grand Tutor and my young lady to help relieve Prince Qi of his worries." The gatekeeper of the Prince Qi's mansion had never seen such a scene before. He was so frightened that he rushed inside to report the situation. Soon after, Fu Hai, the eunuch in charge of the mansion, came out, wiping the cold sweat from his forehead. "Oh, Uncle Zhong, what kind of act are you putting on here?" Fu Hai lowered his voice, trying to pull Uncle Zhong aside. "The prince is already upset by today's events at the palace. If you keep blocking the entrance with so many people, it might anger the prince." "Eunuch Fu Hai, please speak with caution." Uncle Zhong subtly avoided his hand, raising his voice slightly instead. This drew the attention of the bystanders, who pricked up their ears. "Today, the emperor, out of concern for Prince Qi, has ordered that the prince return to his residence and reflect on his actions, thereby cultivating his character. My daughter remembers all those rare books and jade carvings from past dynasties that were lent to the prince for his enjoyment. These are items that can easily lead one to neglect their duties. To prevent the prince from being distracted by these objects and thus failing to fulfill the emperor's wishes for self-reflection, I have been ordered to take back all these items." As soon as these words were spoken, the onlookers immediately began whispering among themselves. "Listen. The Yan family knows how to think big. They're just trying to prevent Prince Qi from becoming distracted by trivial matters. What so-called loan for enjoyment? It's clearly a dowry that the Yan family gave as a gift. Now that the marriage has been called off, it naturally needs to be taken back. The Holy Emperor has issued an order to impose restrictions on their movements. It's only natural for the Yan family to take precautions like this. Ho Hai listened to the discussions around him, his face turning pale and red in turn. Yet he couldn't say a word in defense. Uncle Zhong kept referring to the will of the sage and spiritual cultivation. If he tried to oppose them, it would only serve as proof that Prince Qi was defying orders and indulging in pleasures. In the royal study, there was a sharp bang as a fine roux porcelain teacup was smashed to pieces on the bluestone floor, spilling tea everywhere. Bitch. Yan Mingshu is really going too far. Chu Qian's eyes were blood red. Like a furious beast trapped in a cage, he paced restlessly back and forth in the study. He still wore the prince's robe, but all traces of his usual composure from the morning court meetings had vanished. Lu Qingwan knelt not far from the broken porcelain shards. Now dressed in a simple cotton skirt, by the rules, she was merely a lowest-ranking concubine, ineligible to wear gold or silver jewelry. She timidly raised her head, about to speak to calm him down. Your Highness, please calm down. Shut up. Chu Qian turned his head sharply, staring at her with a fierce expression, pointing at her nose. He cursed. If it weren't for you crying and acting like a shameless seductress in the hall, how would father have become so furious? All the efforts I've made over the years have been ruined by your mouth. Lu Qingwan trembled with every word of scolding. Tears streamed down her face like beads breaking from a string. Yet she bit her lips tightly, refusing to make a sound. She couldn't understand how her cousin, who had spoken to her gently yesterday and promised to protect her for life, could now behave in such a cruel and heartless manner. Your Highness, something terrible has happened. A courtier rushed into the study, gasping for breath. News from Huitong Bank says that the Yan family has frozen all our accounts. We won't be able to get our monthly stipends this month. And at Nanshan Academy, the Grand Tutor's office has stopped providing funding. The students there are now making a scene, accusing your Highness of going back on your word and demanding that you leave. Chu Qi's body staggered violently, and he collapsed onto the armchair. His face as pale as death. It's over. Completely over. Yan Mingshu not only wants to take back those worthless things, but also wants to cut off his sources of income and destroy his reputation. It wasn't until this moment that Chu Qian truly realized that Yan Mingshu's righteous words in the hall today weren't merely a tactic to gain an advantage through retreat, but a complete break with him. Let her take it. Give her everything. Chu Qian spat out these words through gritted teeth, almost chipping his molars in the process. Issue orders that no one must stop her. Let the Yan family move whatever they want. I want to see whether, without Yan Mingshu, I, Chu Qian, can even survive. At dusk, in the Grand Tutor's residence, I stood under the eaves in front of the warehouse, watching Uncle Zhong direct the servants to carry boxes of paintings, antiques, and other valuables into the warehouse. He checked each item against the ledger, a satisfied smirk playing on his lips. In my past life, these items were used by Chu Qian to win over court officials. But this time, he won't even be able to steal a single jade ring from the Yan family. Madam, everything has been recorded accurately. Not a single item missing. Uncle Zhong closed the ledger, stepped forward quickly, and reported in a hushed voice, his eyes filled with admiration. However, today, something almost went wrong outside the Prince Qi's mansion. Oh. I raised my eyebrows slightly. Someone from Prince Qi dares to take action. Uncle Zhong shook his head, his expression showing a mix of relief and confusion. The guards of the Prince Qi's mansion were on the verge of drawing their swords and driving those people away. But luckily, a group of soldiers from the patrol unit happened to be passing by. The commanding officer simply said, "Under the Emperor's rule, no noise or troublemaking is allowed in front of the Prince Qi's mansion." With that, the guards were forced to back down. Only then was it possible for me to get my belongings back without any problems. Uncle Zhong, do you know which officer is patrolling the streets today? I asked softly. I've inquired, and it turns out he's Wei Zheng, a deputy general under General Huo, replied Uncle Zhong. I nodded slightly, gazing at the gradually darkening sky. My voice was calm, yet tinged with underlying emotion. Understood. Ensure this matter is handled properly. Order that those who accompanied us today be rewarded with 3 months' worth of their regular pay. Additionally, retrieve several boxes of high-quality gold ointment for treating wounds. Along with that century-old Liaodong ginseng. Pack them up for later use. Miss, are you giving this to someone else? Uncle Zhong was puzzled. There's no need to rush. I adjusted the cloak on my shoulders and turned to walk toward the back of the house. Debts owed must be repaid at the right moment. The night breeze was gentle, dispersing the scent of osmanthus in the courtyard. I walked steadily. Yet in my heart, I had already begun to plan the next move. 3 days later, the morning breeze of early autumn carried a hint of biting cold. Juhilu Tower is located right in the heart of Zhuke Street, the busiest area of the capital. It was originally the most profitable restaurant among the Yan family's properties. In my past life, I was deceived by Chu Qian's sweet words and handed over the ownership of this restaurant to him. He used it as a base to host lavish banquets, network with court officials, and even turn it into a tool to spy on the private affairs of various officials. All the gold and silver spent during those banquets eventually became weapons used against the Yan and Huo families. Now, living this life again, standing beneath this gilded plaque, I feel that every brick and tile of this building exudes a determination to reclaim what belongs to us. Wearing a plain-colored veil, I quietly entered the private room at the far end of the second floor of Juha Tower, accompanied by my personal maid Banksia and several bodyguards. Madam, you've arrived. The newly appointed manager, surnamed Qian, was a man from the Yan family who had been promoted by Uncle Zhong. He was extremely reliable and trustworthy. He respectfully handed over the accounts for the past 3 days. As you instructed, everyone in the building, from the manager to the waiters, has been replaced with our own people, but... Shopkeeper Qian looked troubled, hesitating to speak. Uncle Qian. It doesn't matter if you say so. I picked up the teacup and gently stirred the floating leaves on the surface of the water. Speaking in a calm tone, just these past few days, there have been those pedantic scholars who used to come here and expect free food and drinks. Causing trouble again, Manager Qian sighed. They claim to be acting on behalf of Prince Qi, who supposedly supports scholars. They demanded the finest private rooms and the most expensive meals. When I insisted on charging them as per the rules, they started making a scene in the main hall, calling our Juhilu a disgraceful place that treated the prince's guests with disrespect. Since they held official positions, I didn't dare to drive them away, for fear of damaging the reputation of the Yan family. My hand holding the tea paused slightly, and a hint of cold mockery curled on my lips. The so-called refined guests raised by Chu Qian are nothing but opportunistic scoundrels. In the past, when the Yan family secretly supported them, they acted like refined scholars. But now that they've run out of support, their true nature is revealed. They even try to avoid paying for meals by acting shamelessly. Just then, a commotion suddenly arose from the lobby downstairs. How dare you? Are you blind? How can you even dare to stop this young master? A sharp and arrogant male voice echoed through the wooden planks. I am a guest of His Royal Highness the Prince Qi. I've even composed poems at the deer chanting banquet. In the past, I'd dine here out of courtesy toward you, but now, you dare to show me such vulgar bills and insult my eyes. Oh, young Master Liu, please calm down. Our restaurant has changed owners now, and we have new rules in place. We don't accept credit sales anymore. The waiter's pleading voice followed immediately. I put down my teacup. Through the gauze hanging from my veil, I ordered coldly, Banksia, open one half of the window. Through the gaps in the carved wooden windows, I looked down at the lobby from above. There was a young scholar wearing a somewhat worn-out scholar's robe, reeking of alcohol. He was shouting insults at the waiter, with several other men dressed similarly behind him, all looking furious. I recognized this Monho as Liu Zijin, one of Chu Qian's most loyal followers. In his past life, he wrote many articles praising Chu Qian and slandering the crown prince. Go and deliver my words to Manager Qian, I said, waving for the head of the bodyguards outside. I whispered a few words to him. The head of the bodyguards obeyed and rushed downstairs. In the lobby, Manager Qian heard the message from the bodyguards. His slightly bent back immediately straightened up. He stepped forward to Lu Zijin and bowed respectfully, without being overly humble or arrogant. Young Master Lu, you claim to be a distinguished guest of Prince Qi. I dare not question that. But do you know that the Emperor issued an order a few days ago, ordering Prince Qi to stay in his residence, reflect on his actions, and cultivate his mind? No one is allowed to defy the Emperor's will. Manager Qian's voice was loud and clear, echoing throughout the hall. The diners stopped eating to listen to what was happening. Lu Zijin's expression changed slightly, but he forced himself to say, "So what?" Everyone knows how much the prince values talented people. Even if he spends time reflecting in his palace, he certainly won't stop providing us scholars with the funds we need. This young master is mistaken, said shopkeeper Qian with a cold laugh. His tone suddenly sharp. Since the prince is devoted to cultivating his mind and character, you, who are considered talented individuals by the prince, should not be spending your time in taverns, making noise and eating freely. If this comes to the ears of the imperial censorate, you'll be accused of sabotaging the prince's reputation and allowing his followers to cause trouble. Which head will bear this label of disobedience, to yours, or to Prince Qi's? Upon hearing these words, the entire hall fell dead silent. Lu Zijin felt as though he had been slapped hard in the face. The effects of the alcohol vanished almost instantly, leaving him pale as a sheet. To speak presumptuously about imperial edicts and implicate a prince in such matters was a crime punishable by execution. You're making false accusations. Lu Zijin stammered and took a step back. Is this just slanderous talk? We'll find out once we go to Shentianfu. With a wave of his hand, Master Qian's burly bodyguard stepped forward and surrounded the scholars. The Yin family has always been honest and upright, and we strictly abide by the rules. If you can't pay for today's meal, I'll have to call upon the officials of Shentianfu to settle this matter. Let's see whether the laws of the Great Chu apply to you guests from the Prince Qi's palace. Upon hearing the words Shentian Prefecture, those scholars who followed him immediately panicked, fearing that the situation might get out of control and ruin their careers. They rushed to pull out silver coins from their sleeves. They piled a few coins on the table, then dragged the pale-faced Lu Zijin away from the Juhilu. Laughter erupted throughout the hall. The diners discussed among themselves, saying that the Yen family ran its household with strict discipline. The shopkeeper's words were reasonable and well put. In contrast, the diners from Prince Qi's entourage had lost all dignity as scholars. I turned my gaze away, about to ask Banksia to close the window, when I suddenly heard a very faint laugh coming from the private room next door. The laughter was deep and resonant, filled with unmistakable joy and appreciation. What a sharp tongue! What a brilliant move! A somewhat rough voice spoke, seemingly from someone next door. General. The owner of Juha Tower must have some wise advisor guiding him. With just a few words, he not only got his money back, but also humiliated those pedantic scholars and damaged Prince Qi's reputation as well. Truly satisfying. My heart skipped a beat. That rough voice belonged unmistakably to Wei Jing, the deputy general who led the troops on patrol that day. And who else could he be referring to as general, if not Huo Mingche? I quickly steadied my mind, then spoke slowly through the wall. My voice was calm and composed, neither too loud nor too soft, just loud enough for the person on the other side to hear clearly. They're nothing but people who pretend to be powerful by borrowing others' strength. They don't understand reason. So it's necessary to use national laws and divine will to bring them under control. Please forgive us, esteemed guests next door. The room next door fell silent instantly. Clearly, they hadn't expected that the person sitting in the private room here was actually a woman. Although she lacked internal energy, i.e., had poor hearing, her mind was extremely sharp, allowing her to pick up what they said right away. A moment later, a deep, magnetic voice with a cold undertone came through the wooden planks. The voice seemed to carry the chill of the far northern lands, yet it also exuded the composure typical of those in high positions. Miss Yan is truly skilled in managing the household, knowing exactly when to advance and when to retreat. I've learned a lot from her. He actually figured out my identity right away. I remained completely calm. I tilted my body slightly, facing the wall. I bowed slightly through my veil. Even though he couldn't see me, proper etiquette demanded that I do so. General Huo, you have keen insight. Today, I came here to settle accounts, thereby disturbing your leisure time. I truly am at fault. I paused for a moment, then spoke in a more solemn and sincere tone. It would be better if our meeting were unplanned. That day, in front of the Prince Chi's mansion. It was thanks to the soldiers of the patrol battalion who enforced the law impartially that I, as a servant of the Yan family, was spared from being bullied. The entire Yan family will never forget this. A slight sound of a teacup hitting the table came from next door. Huo Mingche's voice remained calm as ever. Miss Yan, you're being too kind. It's just the duty of the patrol battalion, nothing more than routine procedures. There's no need to speak of any favoritism. This is the prudence of a military general, never giving outsiders any pretext for accusing him of forming cliques or acting selfishly. In his life, he was just like this, proud and unyielding, refusing to get involved in political struggles. Yet in the end, he died due to the king's suspicions and the schemes of villains. The general possesses noble character and integrity. I truly admire him, I said, giving Banksia a wink. Banksia immediately understood. She picked up the purple sandalwood box that had been prepared on the table, and quietly left the private room. Heading to the door next door. My lady says that the general has served the capital with great dedication and hard work. The soldiers of the patrol unit patrol the streets day and night. And it's inevitable that they may suffer injuries. These are some of the finest gold-medicated ointments from the Yan family's pharmacy, along with a century-old ginseng from Liaodong. They're not worth much, but please accept them as a token of the Yan family's gratitude to the soldiers who serve the people of the capital. Please don't refuse. Banksia stood outside the door, delivering my words in a clear voice. Inside the private room, Huo Mingche didn't speak right away. The air seemed to freeze for a moment. Through the wall, I could feel a piercing gaze that seemed to penetrate the wood and stare right at me. This excuse is flawless. It's not an act of thanking for personal favors, but rather the people showing their gratitude to the military. If he refuses, he'll insult the head of the influential group in the capital. If he accepts, it's as if he's taking up the olive branch extended by the Yan family. After a long while, Huo Mingche's voice finally came from next door. His deep voice seemed to carry a barely noticeable hint of interest. Wei Zheng, please accept this. Thank Miss Yan on my behalf for her show of support for the troops. Yes. Wei Zheng strode over to the door, took the wooden box from Banksia's hands, and said, Thank you, Miss Yan. My anxious heart finally settled down, and the corners of my lips raised slightly without my realizing it. This round is mine. General, you're too kind. The restaurant hasn't been finalized yet, and there are many administrative matters to attend to. I won't disturb you while you drink tea. Goodbye. With that, without any hesitation, I took Banksia's hand and calmly walked out of the private room. I descended the wooden stairs and boarded the carriage back to the mansion. It wasn't until the carriage left Shuke Street that Banksia finally took a deep breath of relief. Patting her chest, she said softly, Madam, you almost scared me to death just now. General Huo's reputation in the capital is such that it can even make babies stop crying at night. How could you dare to speak to him directly? I took off my hood and stared out the window at the streets rushing by, my gaze as deep as an ancient well. What's there to be afraid of? Those who can stop children from crying at night are heroes who fight to protect their country, not butchers who kill innocents needlessly. I murmured to myself, as if answering Banksia, yet also as if telling myself, what's truly terrifying in this world are those who preach kindness and morality on the surface, but stab others in the back. The first snow in the capital arrived unusually early, bringing with it a bone-chilling cold. In previous years, at this time, the Prince Chi's palace would already have plenty of high-quality silver thread charcoal burning, providing a warm atmosphere like that of spring. But now, with the Yan family having cut off all financial support and subsidies, and due to the excessive extravagance in the past, the Prince Chi's palace is completely depleted of funds. I sat in the warmly spring-like pavilion of the Grand Tutor's residence, holding a small gilded warming stove in my hands, while listening quietly to Uncle Zhong's report. The young lady is always so prescient. As expected, Prince Qi has resorted to desperate measures. Uncle Zhong handed over a dark yellow ledger and spoke in a hushed voice. Without the financial support of our Yan family, he tried to make up for the losses incurred in bribing court officials. He secretly instructed Zhao He, the Minister of Revenue, to tamper with the winter clothing allocated to the Northern Army this year. They replaced fresh cotton with moldy old cotton and reed fluff, stealing a whopping 80,000 taels of silver in the process. I opened the ledger, my fingers tracing those shocking entries and exits of funds. A growing sense of coldness filled my heart. In my past life, during this same winter, a brutal blizzard struck the northern regions. The soldiers under Huo Mingche didn't die at the hands of the enemy, but thousands of them perished from the cold and lack of food and clothing. Back then, I was deceived by Chu Qian'an. Not only did I cover his losses, but I also believed his claims that the disaster was caused by the snow during the journey. It wasn't until I was imprisoned in the cold palace that I learned from Lu Qingwan's boastful words that those soldiers' lives had been sacrificed in exchange for the gold and silver Chu Qian'an used to win over the ministers. In this life, I withdrew early, cutting off his sources of income, precisely to force him to reach for those military supplies sooner. But this time, without me to clean up the mess behind him, the flaws he left behind became his fatal trap. How did you get this ledger? I closed the ledger and asked in a serious tone. The people of Prince Qi tried to launder the stolen money through the underground black market, but they didn't know that the underground bank had already been secretly taken over by General Huo's men half a month ago. Uncle Zhong spoke with reverence in his eyes. General Huo has sent word that the net is tightening. Please come to his residence to discuss the details of tomorrow's coup in the court. I nodded slightly. Prepare the carriage. Let's go to Crane Tower. The Crane Tower is a secret asset of the Huo family hidden and safe. Half an hour later, wearing a veil and with Bangxia's assistance, I entered the elegant pavilion on the top floor of the Crane Tower. Upon opening the door, Huo Mingche stood by the window. Today, he wasn't wearing armor, but rather a plain black robe. His posture was upright like that of a pine tree, and he exuded a sense of composure and authority, as though he had been through countless battles. Hearing the noise, he turned around, his deep gaze fixed on me. Miss Yan, he nodded slightly. General Huo. I removed my hood, bowed respectfully, then placed the account books and several documents stamped with the Ministry of Finance's seal on the table in front of him. Everything the general requested is here, from the funds allocated by the Ministry of Finance, to the money laundered through the black market, and finally to the properties under the names of Prince Qi's advisors. All the evidence is complete and conclusive. Huo Mingche glanced down at those pieces of evidence. His long fingers tapped rhythmically on the table twice. When he looked up at me, his eyes held a hint of admiration and curiosity. Miss Yan, your tactics are truly ingenious. I'm impressed. In just 1 month, you not only managed to throw Chu Qian'an off balance but also gathered all these damning pieces of evidence without alerting the Ministry of Finance. However, there's one thing I don't understand. Please speak. General. I met his gaze calmly. Yan Taifu is the foremost among the honest and upright civil officials. He has never gotten involved in political factions or military affairs. Why does Miss Yan care so much about the winter clothing for the troops in the northern regions? Why go to such lengths as to set up this scheme, forcing Chu Qian'an down the path of corruption related to military supplies? Huo Mingche's gaze was sharp as a knife, as if he could see through my soul. A sharp pain pierced my heart as the tragic scene from my past life flashed through my mind. Thousands of soldiers turned into ice sculptures due to the cold. I lowered my gaze, hiding the pain in my eyes, but my voice remained firm. Although the Yan family consists of civil officials, they understand the principle that without the skin, where can the hair attach itself? The soldiers in the northern regions risk their lives in the snow and ice to protect the lands of Great Chu and ensure the safety of us people in the capital. Chu Qian'an, driven by selfish desires, dares to sacrifice the lives of these soldiers for his own ambitions. Such madness is beyond forgiveness. I raised my head and stared at him intently. although the Yan family isn't involved in political struggles. We certainly won't allow such vicious creatures to destroy the foundation of the Great Chu. Moreover, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The general protects the country, while I protect the Yan family. In the end, our goals are the same. Huo Mingche stared at me for a long time. His originally stern expression gradually softened. Suddenly, he picked up the teacup on the table and, using tea instead of wine, raised it in a solemn toast to me. What a wonderful saying. Different paths lead to the same goal. On behalf of the 30,000 soldiers of the northern frontier, I thank Miss Yan for her generosity. The general speaks too harshly, I replied, raising my teacup. Tomorrow, during the court meeting, the emperor will inspect the winter clothing and military supplies. That will be the moment to act. But Chu Qian'an is cunning by nature. And with the imperial concubine meddling in the palace, these evidences alone may lead the emperor to punish him severely. Yet, it's unlikely he'll be put to death. Don't worry. Miss Yan. Huo Mingche set down his teacup. A murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Embezzling military supplies might still be excused as lax supervision of subordinates. But what if it's treason? My heart trembled. And I suddenly turned to look at him. Huo Mingche's lips curled into a cold smirk. When he was laundering money in the black market, in order to get cash as quickly as possible, he pledged some copies of the military maps to a merchant from the western regions. That merchant happened to be a spy sent by the Northern D tribe to the capital. I've already accidentally let the Imperial Security Bureau know about this. I gasped in shock. What a clever move behind my back. I forced Chu Qian'an to commit corruption, and Huo Mingche took advantage of the situation by framing him with the deadly crime of treason. The Imperial City Guard reports directly to the Emperor. Once they discovered that the city defense plans had been leaked, there was no way Chu Qian'an could survive, no matter how many mouths he had to speak with. Corruption combined with treason is a death sentence worthy of the most severe punishment. The general's plans are flawless and thorough. I exclaimed sincerely. If Miss Yan hadn't cut off his escape route and forced him to the brink, he might not have taken such desperate measures and sold that rubbing after all. Huo Mingche glanced at me intently. Only by working together can we truly play this game successfully. Early the next morning, a torrential storm like nothing seen before indeed broke out in the Hall of Supreme Harmony. My father heeded my advice and took sick leave, claiming that his old illness had flared up again. Everyone in the Yan family stayed indoors. It wasn't until the afternoon that the news from the imperial court spread throughout the streets and alleys of the capital. Uncle Zhong rushed into the warm pavilion, not even bothering to brush off the remaining snow from his bamboo hat. His eyes sparkled with unmistakable excitement. Young lady, it's done. Prince Qi. No, Commoner Chu Qian'an is completely defeated. I put down the teacup in my hand, pulled the sleeve furnace closer to my chest, and calmly signaled for him to continue speaking. During today's court meeting, the emperor merely wanted to inquire, as usual, about the preparations for winter clothing for the troops stationed in the northern regions. Before the Minister of Revenue could respond, General Huo presented those cotton coats, which were mixed with reed fluff and mold. When the coats were opened in front of all the officials, it turned out that they were filled with rotten cotton. The emperor was furious upon seeing this. Uncle Zhong swallowed hard, his voice trembling slightly with excitement. Chu Qian'an tried to plead innocence and shift the blame onto Zhao He, the Vice Minister of Revenue. But then, the commander of the Imperial City Guard stepped forward and presented a confession signed by merchants from the western regions, along with a copy of the military map that had been pledged as collateral. After seeing this, the emperor was so enraged that he spat blood. He stripped Chu Qian'an of his princely title, demoted him to a commoner, and imprisoned him in the imperial prison. He would be executed after the autumn harvest. I closed my eyes slightly and let out a long sigh, releasing the stale air from my lungs. Execute after autumn. In his past life, he ascended to the throne on top of the bones of the Yan family. In this life, however, due to his greed and heartlessness, his head and body will be separated. This is the cycle of fate. Retribution is inevitable. What about Lu Qingwan? I asked indifferently. When the nest is destroyed, how can any eggs remain intact? Uncle Zhong sneered. With Chu Qian's downfall, the Liu family submitted a petition of apology overnight, announcing that Liu Qingwan would be expelled from the family registry. Now, as a member of a criminal family, she has been sentenced to be sent to the Imperial Music Bureau, where she shall never be able to redeem herself. My expression remained unchanged. I simply waved my hand, signaling Uncle Zhong to go down and collect his reward. Half a month later, a heavy snowstorm hit. The convoy carrying the family members of the convicted official slowly made its way down Zhuke Street. I sat in a private room on the second floor of Zhuhilu Tower, with the windows slightly open, watching the scene on the street below with cold eyes. In the prison van, Chu Qian had disheveled hair. His once gentle and delicate face now appeared haggard and wan. He no longer carried the air of superiority he once did. Like a stray dog, he trembled in fear amidst the people's insults and rotten vegetable leaves. In the other prison cart following behind, Liu Qingwan, wearing thin prison clothes, clung tightly to the wooden bars while cursing Chu Qian violently. She called him incompetent and accused him of ruining her life. Enraged by her insults, Chu Qian, despite being in shackles, began to shout back at her across the prison cart, each word filled with vicious curses. Watching these two people who, in their past lives, claimed to have a love stronger than gold and were even willing to destroy my entire family to be together, now tearing at each other like two mad dogs, I find it utterly absurd and yet also wonderfully satisfying. They're all equally selfish and heartless. Once their veneer of wealth and glory is stripped away, all that's left is ugliness. Miss Yan has gotten her revenge. Why doesn't she seem happy at all? A deep and resonant voice came from behind me. I turned around and saw that Huo Mingche had somehow arrived at the door of the private room. Today, he wasn't wearing armor. His green robe made the sternness in his features seem less pronounced, replacing it with a more gentle and refined expression. The enemy has been defeated. So of course I'm happy. But now that I've woken from this dream, I realize that the world is like a game of chess, full of surprises at every turn. I stood up, meeting his gaze openly. Have the winter clothes for the northern regions been properly arranged? The 80,000 taels of cash that Miss Yan delivered that day were exchanged for high-quality cotton and charcoal. They were then transported to the northern camp overnight. He stared at me intently, his deep eyes filled with emotions I had never seen before. Chu Qian's scheme has been thwarted, and the Yan family's crisis has been resolved. Huo Mingche's voice was low, yet every word carried weight. Miss Yan has finished playing this game. I wonder what her next move will be. The Yan family has always lived a law-abiding life. After what's happened, I simply wish to serve my father and avoid getting involved in the political intrigues of the court. I answered truthfully. However, Huo Mingche did not back down. He took a step forward, his tall stature exuding an undeniable sense of authority. Yet his tone was sincere and earnest. The court is full of uncertainties. Even if the Yan family steps back, it's impossible to guarantee that there won't be another Chu Qian'an. Miss Yan is extremely intelligent and capable of protecting herself. But wouldn't it be safer to have a truly unshakable ally? My heart skipped a beat as I looked up and met his bottomless eyes. What the general means is, the Huo family has always commanded powerful forces. They never take sides. Yet they're not afraid of any kind of political scheming. Huo Mingche looked at me, his cold lips curling into a tender smile. In my life, I, Huo Mingche, do not worship gods or believe in political tricks. What I truly admire is Miss Yan's decisive and righteous nature. He took out a crystal-clear, warm jade tiger talisman from his sleeve and gently placed it on the tea table in front of me. This private seal gives me control over all of the Huo family's hidden assets and loyal fighters. Today, I use it as a pledge. May I ask, Miss Yan, would you be willing to form a lifelong alliance with me? Looking at that private seal that represented the Huo family's wealth and destiny, my eyes grew slightly moist. He didn't say those frivolous words of admiration. Instead, he entrusted his entire wealth and the future of the Huo family to me without reservation. I slowly reached out my hand, taking the jade seal, still warm from his body, into my palm. I raised my head and smiled at him. Since General Huo is willing to entrust both his wealth and life to me, what is there that I, Mingshu, wouldn't dare to take on? In this life, I've not only reversed the doomed fate of the Yan family, but also seized the glorious life that truly belongs to me. After the storm, there will surely be clear skies everywhere. The story is over. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment. Thank you.